Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board the Bernier bus train. Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernier Bus Show. Today's question is, can accountable capitalism exist? Elizabeth Warren recently has introduced new legislation that would, Accountable Capitalism Act, that would make capitalism accountable. Comprehensive legislation to eliminate skewed market incentives and return to the era when American corporations and American workers did well together. The problem with this is that we are assuming some level of trust with corporations. We're assuming that we can all get along well together and everybody can be happy. It's sort of like when you're in a union, such as my union, where the workers have agreed to bargain with management in a way that assumes good faith, mutual trust. And this all sounds wonderful, except that we've seen in our union, and we've seen all over the world, that you will not get any kind of concession without demanding it. You can't bargain in good faith, at least according to history. You can't bargain in good faith with people who don't bargain in good faith. When you're talking to assholes, you have to remember that they're assholes, no matter how nicely they frame things. And that's my biggest problem with Elizabeth Warren, in addition to the fact that she lies through her teeth, that her daughter is in health insurance industry and Elizabeth has no intention of reining in health insurance, that she is an imperialist warmonger like Hillary Clinton. But we're not getting those stories. But those are other episodes of the Bernier Bus Show. But today we specifically want to talk about the new comprehensive legislation to make capitalism accountable. So here is Professor Richard Wolff on this topic on the show The Zero Hour with R.J. Esco. This is R.J. here introducing Professor Richard Wolff.
Well, I guess it'll come as no great surprise to you that my view is that when it comes to accountable capitalism, socially responsible capitalism, kinder, gentler capitalism, and so on, the reforms that a variety of candidates and others talk about, my response is we've been there and we've done that. And it would be crazy to do it again. And I use the word crazy in the sort of standard definition. If something that you're trying to do keeps failing, you need, if you're not crazy, to look elsewhere, to try something else. It's the way human beings learn how to make progress in the world. Let me explain. We are now still in the aftermath of the great crash of 2008, 2009. And in the wake of that crash, we have already tried a mountain of reforms, basically repeating, not all, but many of those that we tried after the great crash of 1929 to 1940. Those reforms were all undertaken by people like those you've mentioned, who thought that the solution to what capitalism imposed on people, and let's remember, from 1929 to 1940, millions of people lost their homes, millions of people lost their job. The official unemployment rate in 1933 was 25%. And that means every single family in America had either a mother, a father, a cousin, a sister, and so on, unemployed, using up whatever little savings the family had, and then becoming a burden on themselves and friends and neighbors. The horror story captured, for example, by John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, etc.
Right.
We tried every kind of reform. Everything being mentioned today has its analog back then. And we were told that these reforms would be enough, that they could make for a capitalism that would not subject our children, we were told, to what we had gone through in the 1930s. Roosevelt made that promise, and every president since made that promise. And one of the reasons every president had to make the promise is every president, through at least one moment of his presidency, was presiding over, you guessed it, another economic downturn. Mostly they weren't as bad as the 1930s until the last part of George Bush's presidency, when we had 2008, which proved that not only did the reforms not solve the problem, but we were back into an economy that could really whack us as a people, politically, economically, and so on. So for me, to be told yet again that we should make those kinds of reforms, make our tax system a bit more progressive, put a tax a little bit on wealth, provide more support for education, public health, transportation, housing. That's what we did, and that wasn't enough to deal with an economic system that is unstable, has had economic downturns every 4 to 7 years on average for 250 years, despite every effort made to prevent it. A system that is also very unequal and tends to make things more unequal, which the last 30 to 40 years are a stunning illustration of.
Yeah.
And finally, a system that is undemocratic because it is built on enterprises in stores, factories, offices, in which a tiny group of people, owners, CEOs, and all of that, have all the power, and the rest of us do the work, depend on their decisions, but have no power over those decisions, which is the opposite of democratic. So for me, if you don't understand our own history, then you'll be a reformer now, and then you'll fulfill the adage, if you don't learn from history, you will be condemned to repeat it.
Now that is the very root of that problem, is that it never becomes democratic. We're always trusting that we can work together in good faith with the capitalistic captains of society, and that all we have to do is tweak whatever we have and we will be able to make it work. But the captains of industry don't give a shit about the people, and they never have and they never will. And so if we leave the power in their hands but then tweak the system, we'll never escape. And that is the crucial problem with Elizabeth Warren. She's a tweaker. She's not anyone who's going to cause a revolution to wrest power away from the captains of industry. Now let's go forward in history.
Helps us understand why the conversation has changed. Dewey's work in the beginning of the 20th century.
John Dewey, philosopher, educator, well-respected, and so he's going to unpack. He's already talked about his philosophy a little bit before this. So watch the whole clip, but the point that Professor Wolf is about to make is the whole reason to watch this clip.
Was a major contributor to the remarkable, and I almost use the word heroic, reaction of the American people to the crash of capitalism from 1929 to 40. Unlike what happened in Germany or Italy or Japan or Spain, the crash of capitalism in America produced the strongest upsurge of leftist thinking in our history. We had a coalition that emerged of the new union movement, the CIO, allied together with two socialist parties and the American Communist Party. They together were able to dominate the discussion of capitalism's failure so that Mr. Roosevelt, the president, could make a deal with them, which he did, that he would take care of the mass of people in a way beyond even what they were asking for. In the dark times of a depression, in exchange for them downplaying the whole notion of a transition to socialism. The socialists and the communists accepted the deal. And Mr. Roosevelt was true to what he promised. He created the Social Security system. He created the unemployment compensation system. We never had that in America before. He passed the first minimum wage for workers, and it was a decent minimum. And then finally, he created the greatest public employment situation the world, the United States had ever seen. 15 million, more or less, Americans who would have been desperate through the Depression were given jobs, earning decent incomes so they could meet their mortgage payments, take care of their families, and all the rest. And the way he paid for that was he went to the rich people and he said, you better give me half of the money you have because the government has no money. With millions of people unemployed in the 30s, we have no money. We can't help the mass of people. But you, the wealthy, and remember, Mr. Roosevelt was part of that community, you, the wealthy, you have the money. So you got to give me half the money so I can take care of the American people, and you get to keep the other half. But I warn you, if you don't give me the money and I don't take care of them, there's a good chance you won't have any money at all when this is over. He convinced half of them, and the rest is the crucial historical point. He taxed corporations and the rich big time to pay for Social Security, unemployment compensation, the minimum wage, and those public jobs. And when the war was over in 1945, the business community and the rich were bitter and angry. They had to do something never asked of them before in America. Be taxed heavily to help other people. Yeah, your fellow citizens, but they've never been keen on helping them. Not then, not now. Mr. Roosevelt gave them no choice. And they were determined, starting in 1945, not just to get a different kind of politician, but here we go, your language now, to change the conversation, to make the assumptions that had come out of John Dewey, come out of American history, and inspired the New Deal coalition, to make those ideas appear to be invalid, to be foreign, to be alien, to be dangerous, so that everybody would stop thinking about them, particularly in a positive way. That's why going after the communists and converting them from militants who had helped the unions into agents of the Soviet Union was such an important symbol, because it summarized, we've got to clean your brain, wash your brain, so that your conversations, your commonsensical ways of thinking are the exact opposite. Private capitalism isn't the problem for which government is the solution, the opposite. Private enterprise is the solution and government is the problem. And we've been living in that for a long time.
Yeah, we've been living in that for a long time. I'm old enough to know how that works. I'm old enough to watch. I remember the aftermath of McCarthyism. I remember all the Red Scare, better dead than red. And the common sense part is that if you're dealing with assholes, you need to remember that they're assholes. Maya Angelou said, if somebody shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And we haven't believed what we know about the rich assholes. We should know, this is what he's trying to tell us, we should know that they're trying to change a conversation because they're still angry. They're still bitter about what happened after the Great Depression, or their ancestors are. The younger members of those few wealthy families, like the Walton family, And so what we've got to do, we've got to remember who we're dealing with. And so the leftist movement that got strong enough for FDR to put pressure on the rich assholes, it's gone away. It's been through propaganda, mostly through propaganda. We've been taught, we've been brainwashed that our common sense ideas of demanding things, the labor movement, for example, are wrong-headed. We're communists. We're commie, pinko, red, whatever. So the leftists have been pushed philosophically into a corner. But the American people and the people all around the world, if you pay attention, I was asking one of my classes yesterday that I teach, what do you know about world events right now? What do you know about mass protests in other places in the world? And there were 3 kids in a big class that had any idea that workers all over the world are starting to rise up and get feisty. And when FDR was negotiating with the rich assholes, he had leverage over them because they were afraid that the workers were going to pick up pitchforks and come after them. And we're getting to that place now all over the world. We had in Ecuador recently, the Quito, we had people demanding the reversal of austerity measures there. And we've got people upset about austerity all over the world, and they're putting on yellow vests. They're doing all kinds of things that our media don't want us to know about. But that's what FDR threatened the rich assholes with, and that's still possible. So if Elizabeth Warren, and she won't get elected because the American people don't trust her, the American people don't trust centrist corporatists, whether they're trying to be copying Bernie or not. But there's a huge difference. We need to get to that before I bore you to tears here. The difference between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, according to a socialist, we've got a good, well-reasoned article and good explanations of what socialism is and isn't. And then here's a summary about Sanders. What Sanders offers is something more potent than what Elizabeth Warren offers. What Sanders offers is an alternative set of politics, not just a set of policies. His messaging is very clear and consistent. It's working American versus millionaires and billionaires. He stands for a method of change where there's more mobilization from below, there's more struggle, and there's more everyday people taking control of their destinies. Whereas Warren represents a type of politics that I think is about people banding together to elect good people who are going to pass legislation to make sure the rules of the game are fair. And as Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. Bernie Sanders knows this. He's going to take these rich assholes on, and he's going to remove their money from them and their power from them. And we're not going to vote that into existence easily. It's going to take a combination of voting and protests and Occupy and pitchforks, and it's not, hopefully will not be too bloody, but it's got, based on history, if we're actually going to take power away rather than make some kind of a deal, cigar chomping backroom deal like FDR made with the rich, if we're going to actually fix this time, if we're going to learn from history and remove the power from our adversaries, and they're not our friends. I remember Ronald Reagan. I've been alive since Nixon, and so I remember Ronald Reagan well. I remember what my dad thought about Ronald Reagan, that especially after he canned all the air traffic controllers. What I remember about Ronald Reagan is that, and trickle down and all that, I remember that he wanted us to trust the job creators and venerate them and bow down and worship them. The job creators are the people. They deserve these tax breaks. They deserve these advantages. We should trust them. And Elizabeth Warren is a capitalist to her bones. She trusts them, and we can in no way trust them. This is what I think about the way they operate. This is on my Facebook page. If you're my Facebook friend, you may have already seen this a couple days ago. Allow this comprehension to sink in. CEOs of big corporations get paid exorbitant sums. Duh. But why? And who pays them? Shareholders do not foot the bill. Neither do the banksters who fund their operations. They merely put up the cash to ensure that the CEOs are able to extract the wealth from the right people, namely U.S. workers. Corporate executives are like administrative employees of nonprofit corporations. I've run a nonprofit corporation, and I've made this observation about the people who work for nonprofit corporations. They're parasites. Corporate executives are like administrative employees of nonprofit corporations. They are there to both extract donations for a hopefully worthy cause, but also to raise their own salaries. Workers are squeezed like grapes, going back to the corporate world. Workers are squeezed like grapes to fund the salaries of corporate executives. CEOs get raises when they increase efficiency by squeezing labor. They get paid to exploit labor and then to turn right around and exploit consumers who also happen to be workers. Rising costs for goods and services, coupled with increasingly lower wages, is how CEOs raise their own exorbitant salaries. And that's why shareholders typically are happy with this situation. As long as the right people get squeezed, it's all good. That's why we need somebody like Bernie Sanders who's going to take these assholes on. He's going to return more of our means of production to ourselves. He's introduced legislation, a proposal that would gradually shift 20% of corporate equity into funds owned and controlled by the workers in each company. The plan, which would apply to all publicly traded companies and large, closely held companies, would move 2% of corporate stock into worker funds each year for a decade. Once the shares are transferred into the funds, workers would begin receiving dividends and have the ability to exercise the voting rights of the shares, including the right to vote on corporate board elections and on shareholder resolutions. So not only would employees get more money, they would get more power. And that is the basis of democracy. If you want democracy, you have to give workers power. You can't just throw a bunch of shitty candidates in front of them, all bad choices, and say, oh, you can vote. Yeah, you have power, sure. Just vote for the least shitty of these candidates, and that proves we have democracy. No, that's not democracy. Democracy is giving actual power to regular working class Americans, and that's what we haven't had. And the conversation has shifted and made socialism a dirty word. It's made, even though Bernie isn't really a socialist, but what we see here with this really insightful historical look back at John Dewey and at FDR, we see FDR didn't really take the power away from the rich assholes. And that's what Bernie is proposing. And if Bernie doesn't do it, if Bernie comes up short in his ability to mobilize the workforce, if Bernie doesn't accomplish taking the power away, we have to honor his memory, and we have to do it. We have to keep going, just like any good union that doesn't have leaders that are in bed with the administration, like my union. In any good union, the rank and file know what they want. They know what they need. They demand it, regardless of what their leaders do, and they get it. They keep going. They keep applying pressure. If we deny the barons of industry our labor, they can't make money. They need us. They actually need us. If we figure this out and we stand up to them, we can make things work. That's what Bernie is about. And if Bernie comes up short, that's what we should be about. We need to shake our heads, clear our heads, open our eyes, and see how badly we've been fucked by a system that threw us overboard 30 fucking years ago, to quote the late, great George Carlin. We need to wake up, and we need to figure out what's going on. And if we don't, it'll be our own damn fault. We need to realize that the media have been brainwashing us for decades, and they've been putting Democrats, Republicans, all ineffective at bargaining with and demanding from the rich assholes at the top. So we need an actual change. We need more of a change than FDR achieved, as important as his achievements were. Breitbart is not a source of news that I would normally endorse, but Breitbart didn't really spin this article. They pretty much just reported fairly what filmmaker Michael Moore said about Senator Elizabeth Warren and her accountable capitalism. And so I want to put this in front of you. Even though it's a Breitbart article, I'm going to put it in the information section. He slammed candidates Joe Biden, Amy Klobuchar, and Pete Buttigieg for their defense of capitalism in the healthcare system. And Elizabeth Warren, because of her family's ties to healthcare, she's going to do no better. She's just going to be stealthier about it. She said during the televised debate that corporations only care about their bottom line. I have a plan for that. It's accountable capitalism. And Moore hit back at Warren on social media during Tuesday's debate, saying that the candidate's stance on capitalism wasn't strong enough. And so check out this article and be informed about what's going on. Read the article about the main differences between Sanders and Warren. Pay attention to what's going on. This is a time in history that probably won't come back. If transnational corporations get the kinds of power that Obama was trying to give them with the TPP, they'll put themselves beyond our reach legally. The United States won't have, and the United States is a superpower. It's the most powerful nation in the world, and if the United States can't rein them in legally with agreements like the TPP, it's too late. We'll never have a chance again without absolute chaos and bloodshed to fix this. So this is our chance to make a hopefully smooth transition in time to save our planet and to save our livelihood. So that's all I got for today. If you subscribe to this channel, I would recommend that, the 0 Hour, because Professor Wolf is on that show pretty often. And also he's on his own, do a search for Professor Richard Wolf and find him wherever he is. And you'll get a lot of common sense, non-scary leftist points of view. All right, that's enough for today. I hope to see you tomorrow, and keep on burning.
Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back.